Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for being here. I'm so excited to be moderating today's session. My name is Yara Ghoth. I'm a global shaper, which is a World Economic Forum community of young changemakers from all around the world that are driving positive impact, change, and dialogue within their community. And I'm also a tech and social entrepreneur and founder of Nasij Market, which is a platform to support and empower local artisans, creative SMEs through technology, community, and education. Today, we're diving into the world of 21st century entrepreneurship. From disruptive tech to shifting markets, we will be exploring what it takes to thrive in a dynamic landscape. Our speakers today are leaders who've not only made regional breakthroughs, but global ones as well. Joining me in this conversation today is His Royal Highness, Prince Fahad bin Mansour Al Saud, President of the Saudi Startup G20. And we have Her Royal Highness, Princess Beatrice, founder of Big Change Charitable Trust, board member of Opus, and Vice President of Partnership and Strategy at Affinity. We also have His Excellency, Dr. Nabil Khoshack, CEO, board member of Saudi Venture Capital. We also have Hisham Al-Faleh, co-founder and CEO of Lean Technologies. And we have Mayal Gaveh, CEO of Techstars. What an inspiring group of leaders. Thank you all for being here. To kick off, I'd like to ask Your Royal Highness, Prince Fahad, as a leader in the Saudi Startup G20 and an advocate for entrepreneurship, what initiatives or policies do you believe are crucial for fostering a vibrant startup ecosystem in Saudi? And how do you envision the role of entrepreneurs in driving economic growth and innovation?
First of all, thank you for having me here with you. It's a pleasure to share this panel with everyone here. I believe that today, if I would start by saying Saudi Vision 2030 is one of the main reasons of entrepreneurship accomplishments in the kingdom. It's the main drive that takes us from where we were to where we are today. There has been a lot of initiatives and a lot of programs that has been implemented in the past 8 years. We recently have seen the 2023 report of the Saudi Vision 2030, which shows that the number of SMEs has doubled in 8 years, and we have a lot of great unicorns that has been listed in the secondary market, and we have a lot of great innovative startups that are competing globally. And I believe that these initiatives were the main key strategies that made us succeed and reach to a global competitive ecosystem. Saudi once got ranked number 1 in the GEM report, and last year was the second, and we are always looking forward to have Saudi in the top of this list. A lot of things that we can talk about is how to make the ecosystem and startups more sustainable. By saying that, there is a lot of great approaches that has been followed in different examples and in different areas and sectors, in different regions as well. So I believe that improving the ecosystem behavior units is something that is really important. And when we're looking to have that approach, it needs to take a local centric design and then look at the global practices, rather than taking the global practices and trying to implement it locally, because every region has their own cultural behaviors that are different than others. And I believe that in Saudi over here, we're always identifying these behavioral units and trying to improve them in a way that matches the local culture.
Excellent points. Your Royal Highness Princess Beatrice, as a philanthropist and social entrepreneur, how do you see the intersection between entrepreneurship and social impact evolving in the 21st century?
I think one of the most important parts of sort of the entrepreneurial mindset now is that they are young people that are looking at challenges from a very different landscape. The way that we think about social impact, I think, historically has been quite separate to the way that businesses are now looking at the fact that the social agenda, doing things from a sustainable marketplace, doing things that are for the greater good of people, communities, for each other, is actually at the heart of everything that entrepreneurs are really looking for. So defining success has sort of grown in metrics. What I'm really excited about in terms of looking at entrepreneurial ecosystems is seeing that collaboration actually become a little bit more close together. We're seeing now the way that education shifting towards setting up young people to thrive. We're looking at how that's affecting businesses. So the whole conversation around the sort of the social contract between business, entrepreneur, government is sort of blending itself into this ecosystem. And what I'm seeing as somebody that's been working with a lot of entrepreneurs is that they're really excited to take on this challenge. They feel the need to lean into this and move forward to look at some of these changes and develop new businesses and new ways of doing things. So one of the sort of wonderful ways that is changing is that you've got a lot of young people who are asking the why and then figuring out how they can actually make a difference in their businesses. And that's been one of the best ways we've seen that change happening.
Amazing. Thank you for those points. Next question for His Excellency, Dr. Nabil Kaushak. Saudi Arabia has witnessed a steady growth in venture capital investment that led to achieving the first rank in MENA in terms of VC funding in 2023. What was SVC's role in this achievement, and what are the other drivers?
Great. First of all, thank you, Yara. We're so proud of you as a female entrepreneur actually evolving and thriving in Saudi Arabia. And it's an indicator of how the ecosystem is evolving in Saudi Arabia. I just want to highlight key things in numbers, what happened actually, especially the last 5 years since the launch of Vision 2030. There was an unlock of potential great entrepreneurs to evolve and thrive. In numbers, 2018, there was only $65 million deployed capital investing in tech startups in Saudi Arabia. 2023 reached $1.4 billion. And that's actually 21x in 5 years. The other thing is actually Saudi Arabia used to be number 4th, representing less than 5% of the total invested capital in startups across the MENA region. And that's actually moved from less than 5% into 50+% in 2023. That's a massive and aggressive and fast growth in the venture investments. Many factors actually and pillars of the ecosystem helped in this dramatic actually move and change. His Royal Highness touched based on the regulations and the policies that really helps in unlocking the potential of entrepreneurs, launch companies within Saudi Arabia, or welcoming actually entrepreneurs to expand and grow to the Saudi Arabian market. And we have a great example also with Hisham. He will talk more about his personal experience leading one of the leading tech companies backed by top-tier VCs. Last year, we witnessed two Saudi fintech companies that reached to become unicorns, which is actually on the buy now, pay later. It's a fintech company. So having two unicorns actually witnessed in 1 year for the first time, backed by top investors globally. That's another big shift. We are partnering also with Mayel actually on launching a regional fund actually to back startups in Saudi and across the MENA region. So I think that's evolvement very important. The quality of emerging and evolving investors, as well as the quality of amazing entrepreneurs evolved. I've been part of this ecosystem since 2010, and I'm telling to everybody that I'm seeing not only different entrepreneurs, I'm seeing different creatures. And to tap more into this, maybe in a further question, I'll elaborate more about how I see, observe, and describe actually this transformation happened among entrepreneurs in the region, and especially in Saudi Arabia. The other thing I want to highlight also, and keep an eye actually watching on a report that will be launched by the end of this week, prepared by Magnet, sponsored by SPC, on the first time we're doing a founders profiling report, which is very crucial to understand actually their background, their experience, their involvement in the ecosystem. But very few observations and numbers. We are saying that over the last 10 years, there was $3.3 billion of deployed capital investing in startups in Saudi Arabia, backing these amazing founders. We see also 54% actually first-time founders, and this is a very important indicator that it actually states that not only experienced entrepreneurs, but first-time entrepreneurs. And Vision 2030, because all of the changes happened, actually, the economic reformation, the social growth happening in Saudi Arabia, really helped in unlocking the potential of first-time entrepreneurs to launch also companies that are backed now by important and interesting investors. Just not to make much of time, a lot of data and information. Our data is published on our website, so please visit our site to get any insights and reports about the venture investment, the profiling of the startups, the profiling also of the interesting emerging investors within Saudi Arabia, across the MENA region, and internationally. And since we started 5 years ago, the fund size now 2.2 billion. We have backed around 50 funds that are local, regional, international, with one requirement: they have to have allocation to invest in Saudi-based companies. But that's actually helped us also to attract not only local emerging fund managers, but also international experienced fund managers to back startups within Saudi Arabia, founded and led by great entrepreneurs.
Wonderful. Such amazing progress in such short time. The 21x, that's unheard of. Exactly. So we're so proud of like all the achievements that we're seeing. And I think a lot of people that come to Saudi, they feel it in the energy.
Yeah.
They feel the excitement. They feel the buzz. Everyone wants to work. They're ready. They're excited. They're ready to innovate. So the numbers just speak for themselves.
Exactly, and that's not unlocking the potential of local founders, but also international or regional founders to come to Saudi Arabia. I'm always proud of one case, if I want to showcase, is Palm HR, an HR tech company that's launched by a founder coming all the way from Austria to move into Riyadh. We have also the chief operating officer of 500 Global coming out all the way from the Silicon Valley to be moved to Riyadh, actually, to launch not only a local accelerator or a venture, an accelerator backed by a fund that we were proud of backing. But I think regional connectivity and global connectivity, it's very healthy for the startup ecosystem. It's helping local entrepreneurs to evolve and thrive, but also welcoming international entrepreneurs and regional entrepreneurs to participate in this economic formation and social growth happening in Saudi Arabia.
Wonderful. Maybe we can expand on that. Maybe we have some people in the audience that are not Saudi that are thinking of coming and starting or expanding their business. What would you how would you help them navigate, or what advice would you give them?
Sure. So there are many actually programs that was launched actually the last few years facilitating this. One, we have the special visa program for entrepreneurs and the backers of entrepreneurs, which is investors and startups. So that's one key program launched. The aggressive and massive and fast pace of the updates of the Capital Market Authority regulations and also the central bank for the fintech. This is unprecedented, actually, pace and of growth happening in terms of the regulatory environment in general in Saudi Arabia. But also there is the Garage, which is actually a place and an environment, and that is actually helping entrepreneurs to expand to Saudi Arabia or to launch companies in Saudi Arabia if you are coming out of Saudi Arabia, with the other many programs actually available in Saudi Arabia. All of the accelerator and venture builder programs that we backed, they actually welcome entrepreneurs, and actually 50% of the entrepreneurs joining these programs are non-Saudi entrepreneurs, coming from other countries. So, and then helping them to access the market, to access other investors. There are a couple of other programs, part of the National Technology Development Program. And I want to miss on something, but there are many activities and programs helping entrepreneurs to scale and grow within Saudi Arabia, and also helping entrepreneurs coming out of Saudi Arabia to expand to Saudi Arabia. And we can see also this traction happening when I discuss, for instance, Tamara. So check out UK-based startups now becomes a big company, but then they invested actually in Tamara, that is Saudi founded, and becomes a unicorn last year. So that's actually, these are case studies and stories that tells the evolvement of the ecosystem. And always I say that if you need to know more about what's happening on the startup ecosystem, talk to founders or funders, because they have skin in the game and spending their time and effort and money actually in backing these companies that are evolving and thriving. And with all the government programs and initiatives that I just mentioned, SVC, we have the JEDA program, a fund of funds, and also Sanabil also get engaged, part of the PIF. So all these players actually trying to help the ecosystem to evolve. And one thing, we had a chat before about the ego system, the ego. So I think we're moving more into the ecosystem by welcoming actually entrepreneurs to come to build companies within Saudi Arabia, but also if you're building a company outside Saudi Arabia, you're welcome to expand and scale your company in Saudi Arabia. And we have many cases. Like Tabi started in the UAE, but then they expanded to Saudi Arabia, but last year actually relocated their headquarters to Saudi. So they have all these options, and they have to choose based on the growth potential of their companies and what their backers actually aspire to have.
Wonderful. There's so many opportunities, endless opportunities in Saudi, back from the government, from private sectors, and it just keeps growing and growing.
Sure.
Thank you for those points.
Thank you.
Mayal, as a leader of one of the world's largest VC, from your observations, what are some emerging trends and opportunities for entrepreneurs, and how are they being capitalized on?
Thanks for having me. Happy Sunday, everyone. It always amazes me when I come here that on Sunday everybody's working. So, oops, here I go. We're starting. So, emerging trends, a lot of them. One of them is actually happening in this region. I think the Middle East in general is booming from a tech perspective. Techstars has been active here for, active meaning we have people on the ground and we invest in companies here for about 3 years. We now have across the region about 65 companies. We're very, very excited about what we're seeing. As Dr. Nabil mentioned, we're about to do even more together. And I think that's something that, honestly, the world wasn't really expecting. So that's a big trend. And the other things that we are seeing is the potential for the region to become a hub, for Saudi to become a hub, not just for the immediate region, but for the whole continent. So that's a big one. From an industry perspective, I mean, I'm not going to talk about AI. I think everybody by now is sick and tired of it. AI, though, is a big thing. So in case you missed it, I recommend you look into it. But there's a lot of things happening in space and defense. for very obvious reasons, and a lot of really interesting innovation across the globe on that. Lots of things happening in food tech and agriculture. If anything, because the recent conflict, in particular in Ukraine, have made the world realize that food safety, food security wasn't as much a given as we thought it was. And then, in general, what you can see is more women entrepreneurs. Sorry, I have to make that point too, especially because I see so many women in the room. There is more female entrepreneurs as a percentage in Saudi than there is in Europe. And I think that's amazing. I think there is so much potential in having more women being part of the tech ecosystem in general. Again, not just in Saudi. I'm making that speech in every single country I go to. But when I looked at the numbers here and realized that there were more women building companies as a percentage of entrepreneur than there is in my country, France, I was like, oh God, maybe I need to move here. Maybe I need to get helping. So there's so many things happening. I'm sure if you're in this room, it's because you're interested in entrepreneurship. I would encourage you to be part of the movement because change is coming.
Yes. Amazing. Awesome. Thank you so much for those points. So, Hisham, how are you doing?
Great.
So, lean technology operates in a rapidly evolving technological landscape. How does your company prioritize innovation to stay ahead of the curve? And what strategies have you found most effective in fostering a culture of innovation within your organization?
Absolutely. First of all, Assalamu alaikum. It's good to be here with you all. And before I answer your question, Yara, I want to take a moment just to acknowledge what was said right before me. The participation of women in the entrepreneurial landscape would not have come out of nothing. I think this was enabled by incredible strategies that were driven by amazing people like Dr. Nabil. So maybe a quick round of applause for the great accomplishments that was done by SVC and many other entities in enabling this ecosystem. And I, as one, and Lean as a company, are benefactors of that. I think that the incredible work that's gone in over the last 5 years is unimaginable. You're talking about a rate of growth that has literally never happened in any other entrepreneurial ecosystem around the world, certainly not a G20 country. So we really should not take that for granted. These numbers do mean a lot on the ground. Lean, for those of you that aren't familiar with it, is a very boring B2B kind of company that most of you haven't heard of, but maybe you'll use very soon if you haven't already used us. We enable other innovators like Tabi and Tamara, Kareem and eAnd, in addition to the early stage companies, to get integrated with customer bank accounts, to access their customers' data, to initiate payments. This type of infrastructure is necessary for the growth of the ecosystem as a whole. So to answer your question, Yara, how do you innovate? How do you create that innovative kind of solution? We have a saying in Arabic, al-haja al-ikhtira', which is that necessity is the mother of all innovation, right? And this kind of dates back to how I was experiencing this problem in 2018. I actually wanted to be a fintech entrepreneur myself, but not in the infrastructure layer. I actually wanted to build a fintech app. And I was really kind of banging my head against the wall numerous times, trying to access data, trying to initiate payments, trying to access the infrastructure layer that didn't exist. And so by bouncing my head against that wall enough times, I realized that we had to build that layer to support not just my app, or my wannabe app, but the other applications and entrepreneurs. And we were very lucky to start at a time that coincided with all of the amazing enablement that's happened by SVC, Dr. Nabil, and the many other entities that have happened since then. Now, to take that example and extrapolate it a little bit, Yara, I always urge entrepreneurs to do things that sound a bit paradoxical, all right? It's a bit counterintuitive. I'll give you a couple of examples. One example is I always encourage entrepreneurs to think about a broad theme or a broad problem that they want to try and then iterate and kind of just A/B test as much as possible, focusing a lot on the data. In the same breath, I'll tell them to focus and not to do too many things at once, because then they can really overstretch themselves. These two things are actually realistic, and I think that it's really important for entrepreneurs, especially in the earliest stages, to remain focused on a key theme, on a key problem, to really be obsessed with it. It will consume them, while at the same time remaining open to kind of new innovations that might be on the horizon that they can experiment with. So it's to answer your question, there's no single recipe. It's just important that they iterate very quickly and be obsessed with the problems that they have. And hopefully they'll be lucky and hit the gold pot.
Wonderful points. I love the point of iterating. So I studied architecture, and my tutor used to always tell me iterate, 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 and I took that school of thought with me throughout life and throughout my entrepreneurship journey. And I think it's also being very resilient through the iteration process. Like, it's not going to succeed the first and probably won't, or the second or the third, but you learn, and there's little successes within those failures, and it's having that positive, optimistic also outlook towards whatever you're doing and solving. That would give you as well like a boost. So thank you for sharing those
points. And a high threshold for pain.
Yes.
You need a high threshold for pain.
Definitely. So going back to you, Your Royal Highness Prince Fahad, how can collaborative platforms such as the Startup Saudi G20 facilitate knowledge sharing, networking, and mobilize entrepreneurs, investors, and other stakeholders to ultimately contribute to the success and sustainability of the startups within the region?
So today we always say it's a small world, and to make this statement efficient, we need to always engage and be close to each other. As we know today, the G20 is a platform that holds 80% of the global GDP, and aligning these startup ecosystems together and engaging them definitely will have a lot of value. As we know today, entrepreneurs are the heart, the pumping heart of any economy, and governments are the brains that have their mindset and build these strategies to support this body. And investors are the food that this body actually gets, and they need to be healthy. So when they sit in one room, they actually have a lot of practices that they share with each other, and it becomes a force of strength. For example, if you face any global challenges, we know that entrepreneurs are the first to try to solve these problems, so they can solve it all together with all the capital and talent and innovation that is there. There are a lot of as well goals of this engagement group, which is initiating a $1 trillion fund to invest in startups yearly. So this will definitely need the recognition of leaders, because today the leaders of the G20 countries are all aware of the importance of entrepreneurs and the ecosystem that is under the umbrella of entrepreneurship, which comes like startups, investors, SMEs, and talents, innovation, and so on. So I believe that to reach to these ambitious goals, we need to work together to reach to that level, and we will need the leaders' support when it comes to empowering the global startup ecosystem, financially and non-financially as well. We also have the bilateral opportunities that we as the Saudi Startup 20 are focusing on, is to build bridges between each G20 nation. For example, one of the main things that we are focusing on is to build a bilateral VC funds with each country to share these capital and share the innovation and technology, and the funds are one of the great ways for us to actually seed this bilateral relationship between us and other G20 nations. Other than that, if we are talking about the gaps that we all have in our ecosystems. For example, some ecosystems are lacking capital or funding. Some of them are lacking talent. Some of them are lacking infrastructure of different innovative technologies that are in the minds of entrepreneurs. So I believe this is also a great platform to have that. And one more thing that I would like to as well mention is the efficiency of the startup ecosystem in any nation. Today, I believe that we're always talking about the entrepreneurs and the investor, but and the enabler as well. But when I look at some other global practices, for example, Zoho. They built their startup from zero to a unicorn without getting any VC investment, and I believe that this is something that needs to be highlighted, because if you have a sustainable mindset that is depending less on investment, you'll be able to implement this in your approach the same way you're implementing the iteration in your life. And we always hear about lean startups, but we never heard about sustainable startups. So thinking of it from a different perspective would actually help not only the entrepreneurs, but even the ecosystem. So, for example, if we have 50% of the startups are depending less on investment, it will give other entrepreneurs a chance to get into the ecosystem with having more investment chance, especially if it was limited. So I believe that this is something that is really important. And one last thing that I would like to share is to focus on the pre-failure startups, because starting a company is something that will take effort and time, and it has a cost as well. So if you can restart these companies and build programs and initiatives that focuses on either corporate merger and acquisitions to these startups, it will help the death valley to be narrowed.
Yes.
And I believe that if we can see a program that is between enablers like SVC, a corporate company, and a pre-failing startup, I believe this will save a lot of effort and will help the sustainability of the startups to be more efficient.
Great.
Well, Amir, if I can just add one thing. He gave an analogy in the beginning about the brain being the government and the heart.
أود أن أضيف هنا تشبيه مثل العقل والقلب. هذا التشبيه في الواقع سوف يوضح لنا كيف أننا قبل شهور كنا نمر برمضان، وكان رمضان في الواقع الشركات بالنسبة للشركات فناشئة، فقد كانت الاستدامة هي عامل أساسي. لدي هنا سؤال لسعادتك، وأود أن أتحدث هنا عن التأثير الكبير على المجتمع من الناحية الأخلاقية، وأيضا في نماذج الأعمال، وإيجاد أيضا الأسهم، وأيضا ملك الأسهم، وأيضا أصحاب المصالح. إذا أعتقد هنا أنه يجب أن يكون لدينا هذا النوع من هذه نموذج الشراكة، ونركز على الطريقة التي نكون من خلالها رواد أعمال، بحيث أننا نحل مشاكل تشكل تحديات في المجتمع، وأيضا كيف يمكن أيضا لرواد الأعمال أن يتعاملوا هنا مع هذه التحديات بطريقة عملية، ويمكنهم أن يقوموا بمعالجتها من خلال المنهجية التي لديهم. وأعتقد أن أحد الأمور التي أحد هنا ولي العهد أو عفوا هنا صاحب اسمه قد تحدث عن هذه الطرق الحل، وذكر أحد الحلول والمنهجيات، وأعتقد أن هذه أساسية في الواقع فيما يتعلق بهذا النوع من الجوانب، لأنه عندما نفكر بالفرص بالأخص في جوانب مختلفة، فقد يكون هنالك نقاط مختلفة. كيف يمكن، ما هي البيانات المشتركة التي لدينا والتي يمكن نشاركها ونستخدمها لحل هذه المشاكل، وليست نحل فيها هذه المشاكل وغيرها، وهذه قد ما يركز عليها رواد الأعمال ليحظوا بالفرص لينتقلوا لهذه الاحتياجات. ما أود أيضا أن أذكره وأنا متحمسة به هو أننا في هذا النظام في الواقع نرى هذه الفرص كشراكة بين المجال الأكاديمي ورواد الأعمال وقادة الأعمال، وأعتقد أنه الوقت قد حان لإيجاد أيضا بعض الشركات تعترف بهذا الجانب وتعترف بهذه بالاستدامة أيضا، وتقوم بطرح التساؤلات فيها وما هي الأدوات التي يحتاجونها ليضعوها في أعمالهم ويستخدمونها في أعمالهم. رائع. هل يمكنك أن تتوسعي في نموذج أصحاب المصالح كنموذج أساسي؟ نعم، أعتقد أننا في الواقع قد تحدثنا قليلا عن هذا الجانب من خلال النظر إلى المستثمرين، وكيف يصلون إلى رواد الأعمال، وكيف المجتمع ويمكنهم أن يسرعوا ويعززوا من هذا الانخراط وهذا التعاون. وقد نطرح هذه بعض الأسئلة، ونقول قد أحضرت فكرة هنا وقلت قد أحتاج محامي لهذا الموضوع، وأحتاج شخص لهذا الموضوع، وهنا قد نحتاج إلى الموارد والأشخاص المناسبين للحياة المناسبة، وهنا قد نحتاج إلى الشراكات. وعندما نحاول هنا أن نحل هذه المشاكل الأساسية، يجب أن نعرف ما هي الأدوات التي يجب أن نستخدمها. وقد كنت محظوظة في الواقع للمشاركة في أحد المشاريع وأحد المنتديات، وقد نظرت إلى المجتمع كيف أنه نحتاج المجتمع، ونطرح الأسئلة ونقول حسنا ما هي الأمور التي نحتاج
make the ecosystem grow and be powerful. And a lot of that is addressing some of the environmental questions, but also supply chain as well. And I think technology and the data collection, what data is really showing us, can really kind of get into the nitty-gritty as well. So making sure, we talked a little bit about how important the data is, but I think these are some of the resources which technology enable us to lean into, and I think if we can address that as well.
Yeah. If I may, I just want to add more to what your Highness mentioned regarding this, the ecosystem involvement. And I have this saying, actually, the more we move from the ecosystem into the ecosystem,
Yeah. Yes.
this is where we'll have a more thriving ecosystem, where actually the government talks to the entrepreneurs, and the entrepreneurs actually talks to the investors, and the universities also communicate well with all. So I think the more we have this open channel of communication and involvement and engagement and thinking of actually a win-win-win mindset, I think that's very crucial to what you have just said, Your Highness. I think that's very crucial to have a thriving ecosystem among all the players of the pillars actually of a startup ecosystem. Just want to tap into this.
1,000%, I agree.
Makes sense.
Yeah, excellent points. So before we go to the audience, I think we can.
I have one thing to ask.
Yeah,
Sorry,
please feel free to
I
add.
talk too much. I'm sorry.
No,
But
we're
I
here
think,
to hear it.
Yeah, I just want to tap into another thing that Mayel and also Hisham mentioned regarding the women participation. in the startup ecosystem, they were highlighting the female entrepreneurs. But I want also to highlight key players of the ecosystem are the venture capitalists and how the ecosystem in Saudi Arabia evolved. We have at the leadership position of the VC firms in Saudi Arabia or across the MENA region, where women, Saudi female VCs becomes actually a partner level on executive level.
Yes.
I would just want to highlight a couple of names that they deserve this recognition, starting with Sarah Saleh being a partner as part of Outlier Ventures, and also having Basma Snedi being a partner at Impact 46, one of the leading Saudi VCs licensed by the Capital Market Authority in Saudi Arabia. We have also Amal Dukhan, part of being a partner at 500 Global. We have also, the last but not the least, because she reports to me, and part of my team, Noura Sarhan, where she evolved actually to become the Deputy CEO of SVC, as well as the Chief Investment Officer.
Amazing.
And I've been sharing some of these numbers. I think we are one of the top countries when it comes to percentage of women participation in leadership in VC firms that are backing startups.
And Noura is amazing.
Yep. All of them are amazing.
All of them.
Such inspiring women. And before we take it to the audience, let's do a quick question for everyone. What do you believe is the most important quality a successful entrepreneur must have? Starting with Mayal.
So resilience to pain has already been chosen before. Have you watched the movie Dune?
No.
So in the movie, the hero at some point there's a test where he puts his hand in a black box and he's supposed to stay there, and it's very painful. And he's being told that if he takes away his hands, he's going to die, and he just goes through an incredible amount of pain. Every time I watch that, I think that's what the life of an entrepreneur is. So besides pain, I would say the ability to learn, like endless curiosity, because when you're an entrepreneur, you're trying to solve problems that others have never been able to solve. And so you're by definition don't really know what you don't know. And so this ability to always ask why and always look for additional knowledge and always try to see if there is someone smarter in the room, and if you by any chance can convince them to come and work for you or come to your board, I think that makes entrepreneur, that increase their chances of success. At Techstars, we say nobody succeeds alone, and that's part of that, basically.
Definitely.
Yeah. It's by order or just jump in?
Do you want to go? You go first. Don't worry. You go first, please.
Okay.
Just gives me a bit more time to think.
Okay, good. So, deal. I think for me, it's coachability is very important. As a founder, being coachable from day one, actually from just launching your company and growing and scaling your company is very important. And when I talk about coachability, is actually being coachable, that means that you're listening to the backers, the investors, you're listening to the customers, you're listening to the market, you're listening to your employees, you're listening to everybody around you, actually, to launch and scale this high growth company. And that's not easy, because it's the opposite of persistence, where we ask also the entrepreneurs to be resilient and also having this persistence. So I think having this balance is very crucial. And being stubborn actually is the opposite of that. But coachability is very, very crucial, and I see some of the amazing startups actually fail because of this, the lack of being coachable as an entrepreneur to continue on scale and grow. That doesn't mean that other players in the market, including VCs, needs also to be coachable. But
Everyone needs a coach.
but I think that's very important parameter of a successful entrepreneur, from the pre-seed stage to pre-IPO, or even the listing the company, through the journey of launching a company and growing the company. That's it. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I think so much has already been said, but I'm going to kind of sum it up in 3 words. I would say look for as much collaboration as you possibly can. Have as much curiosity as you possibly can. You touched on that. And then also bring about a huge amount of compassion. being an entrepreneur, it's painful, it's long. I think actually sort of compassion for what you're trying to achieve, especially if you're in the social entrepreneur space, being able to look at your own sort of compassion for sort of humanity in this process, I think is also the critical path as well. No one wants to do this alone, so try and find as many people as you can to join up with.
Wonderful qualities, Your Royal Highness.
So I have two things. One is pre-becoming a founder. I think what Dr. Nabil was mentioning has to be before that. You need to understand the market, and you need to understand the maturity of the sector you're getting into, and if you're in the right place in the right time, and if you have the right tools, infrastructure, and talent, and funding appetite. Because if you don't do that, it's not going to be a great journey for you. It's going to be the same example as the movie. And we don't want entrepreneurs to live that way. We want them to enjoy their experience. And I personally lived this experience, and Dr. Nabil witnessed this, starting in a sector that was not right for Saudi at that time. I'm not sure how matured is it today, but it was Silicon. It was starting a social platform in Saudi, and the first VC meeting I had, they told me your place is in the Silicon Valley, and I didn't realize this until 5 or 6 years later, and it was a hell of a journey. So that's one important aspect. The second thing is to be efficient in utilizing your time, your efforts, your spendings, and I believe that there needs to be as well a way for the ecosystem enablers to coach investors to be more direct and practical and professional with entrepreneurs, and give them a direct answer of, for example, whether they want to invest or not. Because today, if I want to raise funds for any startup, I might meet 1,000 persons that will say no, and then I might get a yes. So the easier and efficient it is for me, it will be very helpful for the entrepreneur to save their time and their energy to develop their business further. Right. And I think that's the main two things that I wanted to share.
Awesome.
So I'm going to disagree with Dr. Nabil first, and I'm going to tell you why.
Finally, somebody's.
So I actually, earlier in the panel I said that being an entrepreneur is like being a walking paradox, right? I think that you have to be two things at once and just understand how to oscillate between them. So I agree that you have to be a good listener and you have to get advice from people who know better than you. But you also have to be, if you want to build something from scratch that doesn't exist today, you're going to go up against incumbents, you're going to go up against naysayers, you're going to go up against people who doubt you. And if you are listening to everyone across the horizon throughout the time, you will not have the courage or the determination or the willpower to break through those barriers. And so, yes, listen. So I would maybe encapsulate this in self-awareness, and I would put that under the bucket of self-awareness. Be aware of what you don't know and seek advice in those areas, but also be steadfast in your belief in the vision and break through the barriers in order to realize it. So that's the first thing. The second thing, and this is going to be also very paradoxical, you need to be naive. I think to be a successful entrepreneur, you need to be naive enough to believe that your idea is good enough to succeed. You need to be naive enough to believe that you're good enough to build it. You need to be naive enough to believe that the world will come around and actually buy into your vision. Because if you are too realistic, you will buy into the naysayers, as I said initially. So those two things I'd say are maybe the headlines for my take. And of course, I'm saying I disagree with Dr. Nabil. Dr. Nabil himself said that you have to be humble, but also
But we
stubborn.
need to listen to your gut's feeling also.
Exactly. Exactly.
I would like to add, Yara,
Have
one,
confidence as well.
I'd like to add one more important thing. So Hisham was talking about his experience. I believe that I listened a lot, and some of the listening took me to the wrong direction. And I'll give you a very clear example so everyone can benefit out of this. I went to an accelerator program that was brought from Silicon Valley to Saudi. And all of the mentors were telling us to focus on growth rather than monetization. So we were going to monetization because the investors here wants to see the dollar, and they told us we need to see the monetization. So focus on monetization. But when we went to this accelerator program, they said that's the wrong direction. You need to go to the growth, and then the investors will come. So we shifted our focus. We went into the growth strategy, and we did great partnerships. We did great big steps. And when we went back to investors, they said this doesn't mean anything to us. So they were coming from a Silicon Valley mindset and ecosystem behavior that I was mentioning, that you need to have something that is for your region, that works in your region, and you need to listen to investors, to everyone in your ecosystem for you to be successful and to at least be self-aware of what is your next step, and not listening to I wouldn't say people that are not experienced, because they are way experienced, but they're not experts in this region, and they don't understand the cultural, maybe investing behavior.
Be selective.
Yes.
Definitely agree with those points. Thank you for sharing.
Sure.
So let's move on to the audience now. If anyone has any question, do we pick or? I think
You are the
here is-
moderator, you choose.
Oh, I have the power.
Yes.
I didn't know that I get to choose. I think
has
he
the
raised his hand
microphone.
first, so I'll go with his persistent.
Thank you very much. By way of introduction, I run an advisory business. It was once a startup. It no longer is, even though I'm still running it like one. I agree with you, Madame Gavey, that this social economic transition in this country is so centered upon women, and they're the unsung heroes of what's going on in Saudi Arabia. As a company, when we want to get something done, we'd go to a Saudi woman immediately. And
I mean, men are not that bad.
no, I understand. I understand.
Trying to catch
Okay,
up.
they're
We're
okay.
trying to catch up.
My question, and Prince Fahad, you touched upon this, as did you, Nabil, is obviously entrepreneurship is meant to be organic. But with a country with the challenges and the scale of, what's up against it, like Saudi Arabia, what's the role of the government in being more direct and more interfering in what areas these companies should be set up in, for example, to mitigate climate change, to mitigate the issue of human capital, access to water, as in these are really critical challenges that we face in the Arab world. The Arab world's warming twice as much as the rest of the world. And I just wondered if you saw the government having a role in being quite interfering, especially in circumstances like here, where the person holding, writing the checks is most usually, the government. Thank you very much.
Yeah, great question. Yeah.
Please.
So first of all, definitely the role of the government, as I understand through the actually global benchmarking that we did even when we started SVC, how governments actually stimulate venture investment back in startups. We did not reinvent the wheel. We tapped into global experiences, how governments actually played a role in that particular actually exercise. But that actually applies to other pillars of the ecosystem. But my understanding is the best model is to be the enabler and to empower the players in this startup ecosystem similar to our program. That's why our program is the fund of funds program. So we back venture investors that are backing entrepreneurs. So we are the backers of the backers, literally. And how this is the model actually we operate since inception. We have backed so far 50 funds that have backed 700 plus companies. But I think that's one key role where the governments actually can play a role in terms of the funding, but also the policies and the regulations needs to be friendly for entrepreneurs as well as investors. And I think that's very important. So enable, empower, unlock the potential, unleash the potential of entrepreneurs, that's important. And I remember it was opposite years back. Years back, actually, there wasn't very few venture investors to back tech startups starting in Saudi Arabia. But then, through the fund of program, we enabled the access to risk capital or venture capital. Now, alongside what's happening and the growth of this, definitely other issues arise, which is how also startups can evolve into more critical issues like environment. And I think the next wave would be also how we can require actually from the fund managers that we're backing to comply with like ESG requirements or whatever framework that needs to be developed to make sure that we're addressing social, environmental, and other aspects also. But at the beginning, and tapping into global experiences with governments, you need to be sector agnostic with minimum requirements that to get the attraction of entrepreneurs launching startups. And through this move, then you add more requirements. And that's actually the natural progression of a startup ecosystem globally. You need to give it a push, and then the market will evolve, and then you will have more requirements to address more critical issues. If we started this actually 5 years back, I think it's going to slow down the movement, and that's going to hinder the whole venture investment ecosystem and the startup ecosystem. But that's a natural growth of the ecosystem that needs to go. Then the government can actually address more of a critical requirements that actually balancing the developmental aspects versus actually the commercial and aspects of the fund managers also.
If I may, we work with government around the world, in Saudi, in the US, where we're originally from, in Europe, all the way to Japan, Canada, Australia, so really like across the board. Government play a really critical role in a good and a bad way. So you need, I think, and by the way, having listed a certain number of countries, our partnership with Saudi, in particular MCIT, has been amazing. And we have found here the government to be extremely forward-thinking and very systematic and clear in what they want and putting their money where their mouth is. I'm not going to name any other country, but I can tell you it's not always the case. And it's finding that balance. It's like you need the government for visa purposes. Like if you want to attract entrepreneur without a visa structure, that's not happening. There are countries who do that very, very well and countries that don't do that well at all. That has a huge impact. You need a proper tax structure. You need a proper legislation in general, labor law that allows you to hire people very easily, et cetera, et cetera. And so the difficult balance for government is to be present enough so that the infrastructure required for entrepreneurs and ecosystem to grow is there, and at the same time not too present, because then you end up in a situation where basically nothing happens without the government. It's a little bit happening in my country where basically pretty much any VC in France has to have money from the government, and it's been a long time. And so like finding this right balance between a government that is there to build the infrastructure and the private sector who is being given the opportunity to grow and thrive without the government being involved everywhere is like, that's the secret sauce.
And I think this also transparency between the founders and the government.
Yeah.
I remember I attended one meeting with one of the ministers here and a couple of entrepreneurs, and they were very transparent to share their concerns and the issues, the challenges they're facing actually to launch and scale their company. And then I remember one entrepreneur mentioned, I have one request, don't interfere. Just leave us actually to launch our company and to help it to grow and stay. So I think being the enabler and empower, sometimes you do a minimal contribution and participation, but definitely the special visa-like program launched in Saudi Arabia, the funding and the other instruments actually, the garage and all these programs. I think these multiple programs need to be, as a participant, you need to be always at the position of being enabling and empowering. rather than anything else.
I just want to add one point about how the government or the semi-government can add value to the whole equation. So today there are a lot of mega and giga projects over here, and we have a great criteria that gives the SMEs priority in winning the tenders to this project. So, for example, today, if I would start a company here in Saudi, one of the ways to depend less on investment is to try to win tenders or get projects that will be equivalent of raising a series, pre-series or series A or B or C. So I would maybe go to pre-seed and then start working on projects that will help me grow, and then raise for series C, and then exit, whether in the public market or find my way out. So today, I believe this is something that we need to acknowledge, not only in Saudi, in other places in the world, that following the ladder of Series A, B, C, D is not the only way for you to make it. And that's something that is really important to know, especially if you're expanding in Saudi, or if you're starting your business over here.
Excellent
and in
point,
other
Your
places.
Highness. I'm sorry, I think we have to wrap up the panel discussion, but definitely we can all have and continue the discussion after. Thank you so much for all the very insightful, valuable, key takeaways. I'm sure a lot of us here learned a lot about what it takes to be an entrepreneur. And a lot of the key points were adaptability, focusing on innovation, resiliency, and let's continue to push boundaries, embrace change, and shape the future of entrepreneurship together. Thank you all for being here, and hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.